Welcome back to the show. We got a great one lined up. We know XRP is not a security. We know Ripple's filing for a national banking charter and a Federal Reserve master account. But guess what we don't know? Somebody roll that beautiful intro and I'll tell you.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. You can follow us on X. You can follow us on YouTube and DigPerspectives.com for exclusive content. Right now, $3.73 trillion market cap for crypto. We're creeping up on $4 trillion, ladies and gentlemen. It's quietly creeping up here, even though the market is currently off by 4.1%. Bitcoin, 117,000 plus. Ethereum, 2,900 plus right now. XRP is taking back the number 3 spot. And we are 276. We're up 1% in the 24-hour, but we're up 24.3 on the 7-day. Now, that is a big deal at my house. Now, looking at the range of price here, we can see the XRP pushed all the way up to test 296. Woo-wee, was it on fire yesterday and overnight. You know, this is super exciting, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know about you, but this feels like we're getting very close to seeing XRP have that potential breakout that we have looked for so long. The really cool thing is we still have so much good news in front of us to happen. All the crypto legislation, whether it's tax, market infrastructure, or a stablecoin bill, all that stuff needs to pass and become law. It's going to be a major catalyst. I think the biggest catalyst for the digital asset space. Then you have all of the ETF approvals that we're still waiting on. There's so much here waiting to come out into the market. Then I also believe we're going to see soon after we see legislation become law for crypto, I think we see the U.S. Treasury issue U.S. digital asset bonds. And guess what? So does the Honorable Cristiano Carlo. So this is a really, really incredible moment to see the price surging the way it has been. And then to understand that there's still so many incredible pieces of good news that need to fall. My goodness, where this thing could go, it's anyone's guess at this point. Take a look at this. Listen, what about being on a beach around Destin, Seagrove, Seaside? You know, Seaside's where they shot the Truman Show, and that's how all the other big celebrities and actors found out how beautiful it is down in the panhandle of Florida and said, you know what, we're going to start going down there too. The other reason is because you can get a property for the fraction of a cost that you could buy a home, let's say in Malibu. Right, a $5 million home in Malibu looks like this little shack here that you're going down to the beach in. But in Florida, not so much, because the reality is you can get this beautiful, beautiful Caribbean water from the continental United States and the silky white sandy beaches. Listen, I'm currently shopping for the right spot for me and my family. This is a beautiful little bungalow right here. I'm just going to show you a couple pictures because they're so amazing. And look, whether it's you want a condo, whether you want a house, whether you want to do timeshares, listen, contact Realty Mark Associates. Use the number right down here in the corner. You can call or text or email. Just click and sign up for the mailing list. They will customize the mailing list to your liking and needs. And let me tell you, if you do want to, if you're interested in like timeshare or something of that nature, you can also set your property up to do that without all the headache because they'll help you get every single bit of it done. Listen, don't mess around. I'm looking to take some of these gains and do something really amazing for me and my family. And I know that a lot of you are too. So make sure you check this out. What an amazing opportunity to get that beautiful Caribbean Bahama water and never have to leave the continental U.S. Listen, Florida, no income tax. Check this out. Currently, Governor DeSantis of Florida is trying to abolish property tax. Yeah. What are we waiting for? Make sure you click the link underneath the video, golfofamericaxrp.com, and get started today. This is amazing. So many people are jumping on it. Now, I want to touch this because I realize this is Barron Trump's fan account, not his account, but a fan account of Barron Trump. I get that, but it's interesting. This person puts like a flag on the moon and basically says, if you listen when I posted about XRP, which I had no idea that this account had ever posted about XRP, the account holder says you're smiling right now. If you bought in, you're locked in for what's coming next. because the next 10 days will be absolute chaos. This is not just another crypto. This is wealth transfer of our generation. Understand what you hold. You know, there's been so many people put a flag on the moon and say in 24 hours it's going to be $50 or 500 or whatever the number is. This person's suggesting in the next 10 days things are going to go haywire crazy with adoption and whatever is what they're leaning into here. Look, I mean, it's hard to say how the financial system will enter this arena and these protocols. Up until now, in the 8 years I've been in the space, everything I've seen has been a phase-in operation. However, we have heard talk over the years where we reported of big bang cutovers to new payment rails and protocols. So which way it goes, I'm not dumb enough to sacrifice my own integrity to tell you it is or isn't. I just know that this person says it is. And this means, hey, just put a little note on your calendar, 10 days from now be the 22nd. And let's see if anything happened in between, because we know we got Fed Now going live, right, on ISO 20022. So are they suggesting that these payment rails will be, these new payment rails like the XRP Ledger would be employed for that right out of the gate with high volumes of payments pushing the price to the moon? I don't know. I mean, anything's possible. Like I said, it depends how hard they come into this space, all at once or in phasing. So we'll see. Meanwhile, here's Senator Cynthia Lummis on crypto tax bill, which we need this desperately. Take a listen.
It is now, and that's why we want to discuss the digital asset tax legislation, because there's a whole lot of parts of this. But again, it's smart stuff, because listen, if the more it grows, we want to make sure people are protected with taxes. You want to talk about the most important parts of this?
I do. There's a part that would prevent the double taxation of digital assets. Right now, they're taxed when they're identified, and they're taxed again when they're sold. We don't do that with things like gold and cattle. We tax them when they're sold. And so we need to change that for digital assets. We're also sponsoring legislation that would create a de minimis amount that people could spend. When we're using Bitcoin as a means of exchange, we want to have a de minimis amount that can be used and spent without being subject to taxation. That amount would be about $5,000 per year. So
okay, so now we're getting into it, right? We've heard floated that U.S. domiciled assets could be zero cap gains. Now we're hearing we could have a de minimis amount of $5,000 a year that doesn't get taxed, that you could use for payments throughout the year and send in money and funds. Again, I've pitched a notion, if we see zero cap gains on U.S. domiciled assets, it may end up being, and I don't like saying it out loud, it may end up being that it is zero cap gains for all the financial providers and institutions and money transmitters. And if you hold one of those licenses or inside the banking regulatory framework, then you're cleared for zero cap gains to use it for payments. But if you're retail folk like us, you may get hung up in a situation like what Cynthia Lummis just described. We don't yet know. I don't like it either, but I'm just saying. Keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, right? I mean, that's the way Casey Kasem said it. So all I know is if they did zero cap gains all around, even if it was a moratorium for a few years, then you would have the world's money on those rails, and then you could start to change things after a couple of years. Maybe we split the baby. My wife hates that term, but maybe we could do that. The Fed's ISO Big Bang on Monday, the 14th, as I just mentioned earlier, is a massive upgrade for the entire payment system, the biggest event to happen in payments. Now, shout out to Smoke Dog for this. I don't need to read this to you because you guys know it's coming on Monday. Again, what is going to happen? Will there be any price fluctuation affected by that? Will other assets be affected that will be used in the ISO 20022 standard Big Bang switch cutover? Again, I don't know. I mean, they could be using those payment rails and not use one digital asset, right? But I know that it allows for the coding of those digital assets. And then in conjunction with that messaging and rich data, you could then begin to integrate these synthetic digital tokenized assets into the payment system with that standardized messaging payment form, which has been around for more than a decade. So we'll see what comes of it. Things are happening fast. And just like this right here, this is another one from Unknown DLT, is an account just popped up here lately. Says, as Jerome Powell considers resigning, Ripple is becoming a trusted national bank. We all know that XRP will replace the functions of the dollar reserve currency, and for that, XRP must be integrated into the Fed. Remember, XRP will power the world. Listen, I certainly believe that this is the long-term end goal for sure. This is why I believe Ripple equals the Fed 2.0. And what I mean by that is that the Fed, the Federal Reserve, currently prints all the money. And the U.S. Treasury issues bonds for them to be able to do that and then sells the bonds. For me, it looks like the Fed 2.0 is Ripple issuing all the digital dollars on the new digital economy payment rails. You see what I'm saying? So that's the way that looks to me, because the Fed up until now is not allowed to do a CBDC or a stable coin themselves. So that's where this sits for me. That's how I get Ripple being the Fed 2.0. It's also very quickly how I could easily see the U.S. government wanting to exchange U.S. Treasury bonds so Ripple could continue to mint real USD, digital dollars, a la Fed 2.0, on the new digital payment rails. And then in turn, they take some of the escrow or the rest of it every month when it comes out and then hold that in a digital asset stockpile reserve and then price control the asset just like they do oil. With me? All right. Well, what do we know? Ripple will become a bank because they did file a national charter. And here's more evidence of it. But I want you to listen back here. Shout out to DAI, put this all together. Remember when Mark Yusko said this from Morgan Creek Digital?
The one piece of legislation that is likely to happen, the other stuff, there's a lot of talk that they'll expand beyond just Bitcoin to now, XRP and Cardano and Hedera. And look, those founders have been buddying up to the administration and to Eric, and I think Eric's driving a lot of this, his son. So we'll see. But the case for the strategic Bitcoin reserve, because Bitcoin is digital gold, everything else has different roles. Something that could happen, I don't know if it'll happen the first 100 days, Abs, but there's some talk. This will make the XRP people really happy. There is some talk that XRP could be utilized and or ordered to be used for a central bank digital currency or as the base layer for national banking. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but that's one that if that does happen, that changes things. It's kind of like,
oh, it changes things. Okay, Mark. In fact, that's why they are applying for a banking license, nationally chartered, and the Fed master account. So there we have it. But now that brings me to this, ladies and gentlemen. It's this right here. It's this talk with Daniela Cambone. Shout out to Daniela. I've been on a show before. She's amazing. And then shout out to Jim Rickards and what he says here. So anyone still think all of this was not timed? XRP was created to replace the petrodollar system. You'll see gold well over 10,000 in the not too distant future. I absolutely believe all of this too. You guys know that. And this is where we are right now currently. Take a listen here. This is a great breakdown of where we are. And this is why you've heard me talk so much in the past. Just let me show you very quickly here. Let me see. 1 second. You could tell I don't do any editing, ladies and gentlemen. This is exactly the plan. I put this out back in May, and I've talked about this ever since we saw Trump win the presidency. And it is Plaza Accords were in 1985, and it was France, Germany, Japan, UK, and the US devalued the US dollar. And they did that because the dollar was so strong, it was causing a lot of stress on those countries and their economies. Remember, Japan, one of the largest, if not the largest holder of US bonds. So it's a big deal what's going on with those countries, and certainly Japan. So I said Mar-a-Lago Accords, however, where they devalued the dollar in 85, the Plaza Accords, it was at the Plaza Hotel, that's where it got its name. Nonetheless, Mar-a-Lago Accords at President Trump's Mar-a-Lago in Florida, with stable coins added in to shift the balance from petrodollar and countries holding treasuries to private issuers of stable coins holding treasuries instead. A new Breton Woods is here. And I think that's what you're going to hear Jim Rickers describe without talking about digital assets. Take a listen.
So the dollar's going down. It has been going down for about 6 months. It's down against the euro, Swiss franc, other major currencies. That's just a fact.
The worst time since President Nixon.
Since 1973, and we all know what happened after that, which was the petrodollar accord.
Oh.
In 1974, and that was involved in that in certain ways. So the dollar's going down. So here's what I would say. First of all, so from that's a fact, right? Like I say, you're entitled to your opinions, but you don't get your own facts. That's a fact. But what does it mean? So the narrative that's spun out of it is, this is the end of the dollar. People are getting out of the dollars. The end of the role of the dollar as reserve currency is the great reset. It's all nonsense. The dollar decline is being engineered by the Treasury. This is part of the Mar-a-Lago Accord that Stephen Moran wrote about last November. If you're up for a 24-page
on purpose,
on purpose, exactly. So now, when has this been done before? Twice. Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger, Bill Simon, Jerry Parsky, and others engineered the decline of the dollar at the Smithsonian Accord in 1971, in December 1971, and then it played out over the following years. And that's when gold took off. The Arabs were worried about it, and we engineered the petrodollar accord, which locked in the role of the dollar ever since. And the dollar's been up and down, but as the leading reserve currency that you need, it was a very simple concept, which is, hey, the whole world needs oil. So if you price oil in dollars, that means the whole world needs dollars. Simple transitive law. And that's, like I said, that's been true ever since. Now, there have been up and downs. When was this second time that the United States government engineered a dollar devaluation? It was 1985. James Baker and the Plaza Accord. In 1985, the dollar was at an all-time high. If you use there are a lot of dollar indices. There's Dixie and Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal. They use Dixie, et cetera. But there's the Federal Reserve Board has an all-country trade-weighted dollar index. And if you look at that, the all-time high was 1985. James Baker engineered the decline of the dollar. And how did he do it? We weren't on a gold standard. So with Nixon, you went off gold, and that started the ball rolling. The Smithsonian Accord, but Baker did it with the cooperation of, it wasn't the entire G7, but it was the five of the biggest central banks in the world. They met at the Plaza Hotel. That's where the name comes from, and they agreed to do it. So what you had was central bank, global developed economy central bank intervention to bring the dollar down. They had targets, and then in 1987. They met at the Louvre, and they said, okay, we did it. Now let's stabilize it. And then you had what they call the Great Moderation for 20 years, from 1987 to 2007, 2008, that's when Obama started a new currency war. But my point being, it's been done twice before. Ken Trump and Stephen Moran and others in the White House, Scott Bessent, Secretary of the Treasury, pulled this off for the third time in 50 years. Well, my point is, it's a good question rhetorically, but that's what they're doing. So don't fight the Treasury on this. The dollar is going to go down more. It's going to stay down. And for people to say it has to bounce back, this is not driven by the market. This is being engineered by the Treasury. Well, what happened in the 1970s? Gold went up 2,700%. And one of your esteemed panelists, Frank Juster, made that point yesterday. So gold's going to go up a lot. It does it in stages. I would expect $4,000 an ounce by the end of this year, 2025, but much higher in the years to come. If you just took the two great, there were no gold bull markets before 1971 because the world was on a gold standard. Gold didn't go up or down. I always tell people, if you want to make money in gold, don't root for a gold standard because you can't make any money. But from 71 to 1980, gold went up about well over 2,000%. From the other bull market, 1999 to 2011, rather, it went up about over 600%. So if you just take a simple average of those two bull markets, you would say that this has two things. This has years to run, and gold doubling is nice. I love it, but it's probably going to go up maybe 5 or 10 times. So you'll see gold in well over $10,000 in the not too distant future, but short run $4,000.
Wow, that's powerful. But let's keep moving. Because again, I said, I've been talking about this, and we're going to have a Mar-a-Lago Accords with stable coins. You know this. And then I get this. The conversation with Cristian Carlo on stage at XRP Las Vegas 25. Just listen to this short piece right here about controlling these digital assets the same way the government controls oil through a stockpile reserve, a strategic reserve.
Beyond that, they're also thinking about how do we create something that's more like a reserve? The difference between a stockpile you just collect. A reserve is something that you actually actively utilize. So our strategic petroleum reserve is something that is not just used. You may think it's only used if we have a shortage of oil, we release some oil. No, it's actually used strategically and for monetary policy purposes, because the dollar is tied to the global price of oil. If our economic adversaries, like OPEC, decide to reduce production to drive up the price, we can sell from the reserve to counter that and reduce the price, and therefore control the exchange rate for the dollars. So we use the strategic reserve. Well, when you've got the BRICS countries talking about creating a rival currency to the dollar and perhaps pegging it to physical commodities like gold or digital commodities, then it makes sense for us to actually reserve that to do the same thing we do with strategic petroleum. So that's very much, again, an earlier panel talked about these coming rivals to the dollar. There's no question that there is desire amongst many countries, the BRICS countries and others, to come up with a rival, but that is why the United States is stockpiling gold. That is why the United States is now stockpiling crypto, because they're aware of those threats and they are committed to preserving the dollar. Now, we've got to get Congress on that same track. The White House is doing their job to cut spending. We've got to get Congress to do it. And if any indication, the recent debates over the budget bill and the tax bill are not encouraging about Congress's ability to live off the credit card.
And what's interesting is when you talk about the oil comparison here, in the creation of this digital asset stockpile, they can sell the assets out of there. And I think some people have mistakenly looked at that as a deficiency to that. But what I saw is that is just like oil. They can sell oil. So if they acquire these digital assets and over time they can sell them, they could price control these assets in question just as they do oil.
And countries have been doing this since the dawn of time.
Right. There you have it right there. So that's coming from the point of view in the conversation examining, let's say XRP. Of course, the topic was just about digital assets, but I'm looking at this for the sake of this conversation, this video, as XRP being viewed as a commodity, right? But the reality is we know XRP is not a security. What we still don't know is what XRP is. Is it a utility or a commodity? Now, I'm not going to read all of this to you because I know this is getting long, but the essential is that if it's a commodity, it'll be typically regulated by agencies, as we know, the CFTC in the U.S. for futures derivatives trading. If XRP is a commodity, it would likely face lighter regulation with oversight focused on market manipulation fraud rather than direct control over its use or pricing. However, if it's ruled as a utility, XRP's use case facilitating cross-border payments might be tied to regulated industries, potentially limiting its price volatility, but also subjecting it to rules that could cap profits or price control pricing to ensure affordability and access. As a commodity, XRP's price would be driven primarily by market forces, supply, demand, speculation, and adoption, similar to Bitcoin or Ethereum. This could lead to a higher volatility, but fewer restrictions on the price movements. So if XRP is deemed a utility, it might not be classified as a security per the SEC's ongoing case with the Ripple, but it could still face regulatory hurdles as a public service. This might require Ripple to register with specific agencies or comply with consumer protection laws. And I throw in, or maybe, they're becoming a bank. So, the reality is that I don't know where this goes. However, price control implications if XRP is a utility. It says here, if XRP is classified as a utility, the potential for price control depends on the regulatory framework and that regulatory oversight. So you have to wonder if the FCC would be in, right? The Federal Trade Commission, FTC would be in, how would this go? And is it such that we could see the XRP ledger, which is a public good, according to David Schwartz? If you don't believe me, just take a listen to this right here.
XRP Ledger's hyper-efficiency and liquidity enables developers globally to support numerous use cases, from DeFi, payments, consumer applications. And you don't need anybody's permission to interact with the XRP Ledger, right? It's a public good.
Shout out to David Schwartz for that. It's a public good. So the question is could the XRP ledger be the public good, right, and the utility, and XRP still be a commodity on that utility protocol? I don't know. The reality is what we do know is XRP in and of itself is not a security. And that's enough for me for today. But I tell you, that is super exciting. That's all I got right there. But listen, I just want to give you this really quickly here. What do we know from Scott Bessent? We know this. This is what we know.
Some kind of a grand global economic reordering. It was something on the equivalent of a new Breton Woods, or if you want to go back, like something back to the Steel Agreements or the Treaty of Versailles. There's a very good chance that we are going to have to have that over the next 4 years, and I'd like to be a part of it. I've studied this.
And there you have it. And that's the current U.S. Treasury Secretary. And here's Eggrag Crypto says, do you comprehend, my friend? Stay steady and stay strong. Together we rise and soon we shall fly. Here's the bullish pennant that's setting up. And he's saying, watch out, targets $22, $27. They're on the table. I love it. And could it be even more? I don't know, but we're here to find out. And bags are packed while we're watching it. Couldn't feel any better about it for each and every one of us. Look, we're going into the Freedom Zone. I hope you'll join us today. We're going to unpack what is going on with Epstein, the client list, and the 180-degree change in this current administration, specifically with AG Pam Bondi. We need to get to the bottom of it, and I have some really, really important stuff for you to see. Let's go in there right now. You can join too. Just click the join button under any title of the video and come on in for next to nothing, or join in the Patreon in the description box. It's the same price, same perks, all your daily videos, 0 Google ads, as well as the extra content like what we're getting ready to jump into right now. Come on in.